What is going on, FA Nation? Happy Thursday, and welcome to the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream. I am your host, James Grande, joined by the wonderful Sean Mitchell. Sean, you were on the breakdown for the 6-game main slate today. How you feeling about it, brother?
Good. I mean, not a lot of news to wait for. Everything is kind of out there already. I've already kind of got my lineups built the way I want them, and I don't really think I'll be changing a whole lot. I don't feel like the news could really alter a lot of the decisions that I've already made, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, a lot of nice matchups. I didn't like it as much last night when John and I were discussing things on the podcast. Right. I think things have changed pretty drastically today. There is a ton of value across the board, something that I think we've been lacking a little bit on the last couple slates. There have been one or two value plays, and there seems to be an abundance of value here on today's slate. Just some notable Vegas totals. Almost every game is over 220 other than Utah, Denver. Philly, Atlanta, 228.5. Super appealing. Charlotte, Washington, 227.5. I think that game's going to be where everyone targets. But Sean, 6 games.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely a chalk game for sure. But 6 games, ready to hop into the playbook?
Let's do it.
Let's start at the point guard position as always. And we have 2 options here at the top of the heap in terms of price. We have Trae Young and Ben Simmons matching up with one another. Ben Simmons is ill but is expected to play. We just got a recent update that he still remains probable. Any worry about Simmons' illness? And if so, are you fine with playing Trae Young up here?
Now looking at the projections, knowing that it looks like Ben Simmons could be a little bit chalky. I mean, obviously that is a big high total in that game as well. It kind of looks like Trae Young might kind of fall through the cracks a little bit as far as the projections look right now. I do like Trae Young a whole lot. Ben Simmons, I'm not really worried about the illness. As long as he's playing, I'm totally fine with that. It's a great spot. Atlanta's been giving up tons of points to that point guard spot, small forward spot, whatever you want to call it. Ben Simmons plays both. So, he's basically wrote that in the playbook, 1.25 fantasy point per minute with Horford off the floor. So obviously good numbers. It doesn't really get a huge usage bump. But if you know Ben Simmons, he's not a big usage player. Like he just doesn't get a lot of usage. So he does just a little bit of everything, rebounds, assists, steals, everything. So I'm not worried about that, but I am worried about his projection and being a little bit chalky on the slate. So in that event, Trae was the cover of the playbook, and I'm sticking by Trae. The price isn't really a whole lot different there from Ben Simmons, and he's still my top play.
Moving down, we have Kemba Walker here, and I think we just got an interesting note which could be beneficial to Kemba. Jason Tatum officially limited to 25 minutes. So I think that actually gives Kemba quite the boost, and the ownership kind of seems a little skewed because that ownership was likely sent in prior to the Tatum probable tag. Any thoughts on going? I'm sure people have teetered with Kemba all day regardless. Tatum's out, let's play Kemba. Tatum's in, let's maybe, pump the brakes. Any thought on going back to Kemba now that we know that Tatum's only going to play 25 minutes?
Yeah, at first I was a little worried, paying the $8K price tag on both sides. But now going back, I think I'm totally fine with it. Kemba's had over a 31% usage rate in his last 4 or 5 games. He's put up 54 or more in his last 3 or 4. 2 of 3. Let me go back on that. Nonetheless, it's a great spot. Both of these teams have been running with really good pace lately. They're both in the top 10 in terms of pace over the last 10 games. And Kemba has the flash. He's got the upside. He's got 60-point upside going against DAR tonight, who we all know does not play very good defense. So definitely don't mind Kemba here. He could end up being a little bit more chalky now. So cash play probably. Maybe not so much tournaments. But I think he's definitely a good cash game play, which he usually is on most nights anyways.
Right, I agree. I think he's made for a fine cash game play, especially if you're pivoting off someone like Young and Simmons, where there's probably enough value to fit them both on FanDuel. But on DK, you probably have to pick one or the other, and you could probably pair them with Kemba. But moving down your point guard list, the rest of the mid-tier, we have the likes of Kyle Lowry in a great spot against Cleveland, Terry Rozier in the chalky game of the night, coming off a massive game against the Knicks his last time out, and Fred VanVleet in that same spot against Cleveland. Why don't you break down those three, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Lowry, I think, is going to go through the cracks. I don't think really hardly anybody's going to play him. 7.5K is awfully cheap for a guy like Kyle Lowry, who's literally been triple-double potential in multiple times this season. It's just as you mentioned, it's a great spot against Cleveland. We know they're not very good in the backcourt as far as defending-wise goes. The only thing you really have to worry about is that the game gets out of hand a little quickly. Right. But Kyle Lowry's still been playing lots of minutes. Like, he doesn't come off the floor very much, even in blowouts. So, that's why I have him as far as my GPP lineup goes. I'll give that hint away. He is definitely in it for me on DK, and I think he's definitely a great GPP play. I think nobody's going to go there. And Terry Rozier is kind of in that same boat. I mean, the dude's been really good, 37 or more in his last 8 of 7 contests, or 11, 8 of 11. Really good numbers for Terry Rozier. I know, Devontae Graham was ill last game, and he put up another good game, 46 fantasy points. And, of course, it's Washington, who plays with a lot of pace, not a lot of defense. So it's a great spot for Rozier. Definitely don't mind him as well. I could even teeter-totter him playing in cash at his price because I think, he's cheap enough where you can still play him in cash. Right. His floor's been really good, and it's a great spot. VanVleet is just another guy it's a cash lock for me. He's in all of my cash lineups. Just really think, it's Cleveland. They're terrible against the shooting guard. He's playing 30-plus minutes a game. He's taking 12 to 14 shots a game or more, 9 or 10 three-pointers a game, attempts at least. So I just definitely don't mind Fred VanVleet. I think that Lowry is definitely my GPP play, and then it's Rozier and VanVleet likely. VanVleet's probably my cash, and Rozier likely to teeter-totter between both.
Yeah, I think an interesting point you made about Rozier being a cash play today. We let the slate dictate who we play where. And I think that's a solid foundation to building rosters on a day-to-day. I am having a lot of trouble talking right now, Sean, which is bad because we are on a live stream talking to people. But let's move over to shooting guard, where, let's face it, if we're making 100 lineups, Sean, and you're a GPP guy, but I mean, look. It's Bradley Beal. The starting lineup around him is disgusting, horrible, horrifying, awful, and he's dominating right now. If you're making 100 lineups, how many would feature Bradley Beal?
In GPPs, if I'm playing 100 lineups, Brad Beal at his price, I'm probably not going to have more than probably 15%. His price is up there, especially on DK at 9.4, and there's just a lot of plays that I like guard-wise that are a little bit cheaper that I feel like can still have 45-plus upside. The guy that's right under him, obviously, I feel is obviously in a great spot as well. I don't feel like I really don't feel like you have to go to Beal tonight. I feel like Washington obviously is a very fast team, but Charlotte is ranked dead last in terms of pace. So this game could really fall flat. I hate to say that. I know it's a major pace-up spot for Charlotte, but I could obviously as well see this game slowing down a little bit with them trying to slow it down because that's their identity. I mean, they're not fast. Washington is. So it'll be really interesting to see if they play up to the pace with Washington or if Washington kind of cedes the pace a little bit to them. So I don't feel like you have to play Brad Beal tonight. I feel like there's a lot of other good plays. So, yeah, I'm probably 15%. 100 lineups going 15.
Well, let's talk about those other options because we have D'Angelo Russell going up against the Celtics backcourt that features obviously Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, good wing defenders. And then we have Donovan Mitchell traveling to Denver on the back-to-back, probably the toughest, I would say the toughest back-to-back to travel to across the league. I assume those are the two guys you're referring to if we're pivoting off Bradley Beal, right?
Yeah. I really like D'Angelo Russell once again, obviously. He's taken 21, 25, 25, 19 shots in his last 4. Same thing with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell has taken 21 or more in his last 3 or 4 as well. Of course, Mike Conley has already been rolled out. Not that really plays just a huge dividend with Donovan Mitchell. But Donovan Mitchell almost 800 cheaper than he was last night, and then he has been on a few slates. Just because he's going into Denver, just because it's a back-to-back, this guy's still been carrying almost a 33% usage rate over his last 5 games. I mean, Donovan Mitchell at 7.2 is fairly cheap for me, especially since we just noted that Gary Harris has been ruled out. That is a good one. That's a real big one, obviously. So I really like some Donovan Mitchell tonight. D'Angelo Russell is probably one of my favorite GPP plays tonight. I know it's in Boston. I know it's a big spread for Boston at home, but I still think that he's going to chuck beans. And I think that, he's scored 26 or more in his last five straight games. So he's going to continue to shoot. I like D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about the Donovan Mitchell matchup. Gary Harris is an elite perimeter defender, and when he's not there, like Torrey Craig is good, Malik Beasley, these guys are okay. If we see more Michael Porter, I mean that's going to leave Donovan Mitchell open against guys Will Barton's and Will Barton, lengthy guy, but worries more about his offensive game. I think that could be a positive matchup and a low ownership too. So I agree there. Let's move down the list where we have Lou Williams, and I find that interesting. And that is the true definition. Like that symbolizes you as a GPP guy, because we know Paul George is coming back. This is the first time we've seen the Clippers really, not even just Paul George, Patrick Beverley is back too. This is the first time we've seen them at full strength in quite a while. The price is really nice. And FanDuel specifically, 5,600. Lou Williams stands out to me a little bit here, considering the Clippers are full strength. I'd love for you to elaborate on why you like him tonight.
Well, Sacramento has been giving up pretty good points to that shooting guard spot. Right. Particularly, it was when Buddy Hield was starting. So I got a feeling that maybe Lou sees a little bit of Buddy, sees a little bit of that second unit. Also, if you noticed, I'm sure everybody watched last night, they got blown out pretty good by OKC in OKC. Now they're going to the LA Clippers to play the Clippers on the road. I just feel like this game could get out of hand pretty quick. I just don't feel like Sacramento matches up at all with the Clippers. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of Lou Williams. I feel like we're going to get a lot of Montrezl Harrell. And that's a correlated stack that I love tonight. And I've said it in chat. I've said it on Twitter. I've said it everywhere. That's just a stack and it's projecting to be really low owned. So I love it for GPPs. If those two guys go off and they get a lot of garbage time, you're looking at a hit right there. So.
Right. I mean, it's a GPP winning correlated stack. Agreed there. Kevin Huerter rounds out the shooting guard position. Solid value, 4,900, 5,300 on DraftKings respectively. Salary saver again. Lots of really good value.
He's playing lots of minutes, 25 or more in the last 3-5. Yeah, he's playing over almost 30 minutes a game. I know it's Philadelphia, but with Josh Richardson out, they've been a little bit more weaker against the guard play. So he's a guy that continues to stay active. He's usually around all around the ball most of the time. So I think he's one of those guys that could easily go off for 35, 40 in any given game. He just hasn't exactly done it here lately, but we've seen it from him. We've seen the upside. We've seen him do it multiple times. So I think at the price, I think I definitely think he's cash worthy, at least for sure.
Let's move on to small forward. I think small forward, we can safely say, is the worst spend-up position on the slate. I think there's a lot of value. I think we can find a lot of guys in the mid-tier, but there's no one that necessarily stands out at the top, unless you're playing on FanDuel, of course, where Pascal Siakam is still listed as a small forward, and that's still obviously incorrect. But Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, top your list. Along with Will Barton here in the upper mid-tier. Again, we talked about it with Kemba. It's probably similar for Brown and Hayward, considering Tatum's on a minutes restriction. We probably like them a little bit more now as well, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, Hayward he was already kind of a cash game lock for me. The guy's playing so many minutes, doing really good lately. 34 or more in his last 3 straight. He's been playing really good, playing lights out. Jaylen Brown just has that upside. When he gets going, he can put up 40 plus real quick. So really like the spot for Jaylen Brown here. I think he's a great GPP play, especially at the price. He's projected to be decently low owned on DK, which I find pretty good. I like that. Again, Hayward, just a nice cash play, I think. Will Barton, I think, is really interesting. He really hasn't done anything here lately. And we know Will Barton has the upside. We know he's he had a long streak there in the first of the season where he was going for 30 plus in his last, like 7 or 8 home games. So as I mentioned in the playbook, he's back at home after they've just went and played 4 games on the road out of their last 6. So this is a great spot for him. They're catching Utah on a back-to-back. Obviously, they're missing Gary Harris as well. So, Barton's going to play a lot of minutes. He's going to see the ball quite a bit. Gary Harris likes to shoot quite a bit. So Will Barton will get his looks, and I think he's fair priced. I mean, I just think he's just a fair price, and hopefully he can go off for us tonight.
Yeah, I mean, upside at that price is tremendous for Will Barton if he really gets going. So hard not to like him for tournaments there. When we move down the list, we have Troy Brown Jr. in that Charlotte matchup that everyone seems to be gravitating to. And then we have Glenn Robinson, who John and I spoke about on the podcast last night. In correlation with Draymond Green. Draymond Green's been playing well, and Glenn Robinson has benefited from that. Why don't you talk about Brown and Robinson down here at the value tier?
Yeah, I mean, Troy Brown obviously has played 32 and 35 minutes in his last 2. He's getting a lot of run with Jordan McRae being out. His price is fair. I mean, he's put up 27.3 and 32.3 DK points in his last 2. He's getting good run. I mean, there's really no, the price is there, the production's been there, the minutes have been there. That's really what you look for in fantasy. I don't really see, obviously on DK, he's projected to be a little low on. I'm kind of iffy on that. I don't really know what the deal is. He's projected to be pretty high on FanDuel, which you would kind of expect. But then, Glenn Robinson, I think he's just a good cash play. He's cheap. He's playing over 30 minutes. He's put up 30 or more fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. Not the greatest matchup here against Boston, but I'm totally fine with it. Obviously, the minutes are there. He's just a low-end filler that you can put in your cash lineup to get some bigger names.
I do want your opinion on two value options here at small forward, just because I do think this is a position that we can look to spend down at. And one of them being Miles Bridges, who is in the Washington matchup, I think did re-enter the starting lineup after that 1-game absence where Nicholas Batum got his start in Paris. And then OG Anunoby, who's only $4,300 over on FanDuel, and he's under 5K on DraftKings as well. And now he's, sans Marc Gasol and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson. Any love for either of those guys in the value tier?
Yeah, actually, I am playing some OG. Just a great spot, obviously, against Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah, I like OG in this spot. I'm not so much on Bridges. I just think he's too inconsistent.
Right.
He definitely has the upside to go for 30-plus on some nights, and he has. But you see the floor in a lot of his games, too, where you're getting the low teens, and that's just really not anything that I really want to mess with. Obviously, being a GPP player, I'm needing upside. And I don't feel like he has 40-plus on most nights. OG, we've seen him go for 35-plus a few times, getting starter minutes. Obviously, you just mentioned the injuries to Marc Gasol and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, so he's going to have to be thrusted into good playing time. So I don't mind OG. Another guy that I didn't have in the playbook that obviously comes kind of into fruition now is Joe Ingles. I know I didn't mention him as well, but, with Mike Conley being out, he's likely to run some of the point as well with Donovan Mitchell. So I do like Joe Ingles. I know I have him in some of the lineups, and I will be playing some Joe Ingles. So I want to throw him out there as well just to throw out some transparency. I do like Joe Ingles tonight.
Only $4,900 on DraftKings for Joe Ingles is super appealing. Just so everyone's aware, Miles Bridges in 2 games against Washington this year, 38 fantasy points per game. I just had to mention it.
The proof's in the pudding. The numbers are there. I mean,
that says Washington sucks, Sean, more than Miles Bridges is actually like really good at basketball. Washington, John and I talked about last night. The last 2 games they have been involved in, there has been 280 points scored in each of those games. So
what about the 4 or 5 games before that?
The 4 or 5 games were still over significantly
where they beat another team.
True. This is true.
I was about to say, we can compare all day long. And again, I don't mind if you guys want to play Bridges, but I will not be on Miles Bridges.
There was more of a overall assessment of the Washington defense of how bad they are. But
they're bad.
And the starting lineup is just I can't stress that enough. That's scary. Let's move on to power forward, where a lot of really top tier. There's a lot of top tier guys here tonight.
Power forward is very deep tonight.
Power forward is. Would you go on a limb and say it's the best position on the board?
Yeah, hands down. I think it's easily the deepest. It's kind of the hardest to choose from because there's really a lot of good plays that are right kind of in the same range. I mean, again, you just then have to determine what you want for GPP and cash. And I do think there's definitely a distinguished, you can decipher pretty easily which ones you think should be cash and GPP. So I do think it's very, very healthy, though. That's a really good list.
Well, let's talk about the list. We have at the top, we have Kawhi Leonard, who has been incredible. Sans Paul George. Now, Paul George is back. We're not entirely sure if there's a minutes restriction. There is no back-to-back, so he could play a full complement here. We just don't know. Pascal Siakam, who is every position under the sun, if just depending on which site you're talking about. He has been incredible lately, and he gets the Cleveland matchup. He's back to a full complement of minutes. Again, we mentioned there are multiple guys out for Toronto front court. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and Marc Gasol both inactive, so maybe that gives Siakam a couple extra run. John Collins, who was originally going to start at center, now he's not. He's going to start at power forward, and he's likely to draw Mike Scott. If Mike Scott doesn't start, it will be just Tobias Harris sliding down to the power forward. I think probably advantage Collins in either one of those situations. Yeah. And then Kevin Love, who probably falls by the wayside here considering the other three guys we just mentioned. I mean, Sean, why don't you break down these four guys? Kevin Love to you has to look interesting based on the others' ownership projections, right?
Absolutely. Obviously, it's a great spot. Nobody's going to play him because it seems like nobody wants to play Cleveland tonight. Those are usually the bread and butter GPP spots. I hate to say it. And Toronto has not exactly been that good. They're allowing the fourth most fantasy points to that power forward spot over the last 10 games. They've kind of struggled against it all season long, kind of the same way with the small forward spot. So it's very interesting. 35 or more in his last 4 to 6 games. His price is fair. His projection's looking good. Ownership is good. So, yeah, I'm definitely a fan of some Kevin Love. Other than that, Pascal Siakam on the other side is obviously in a great spot. His price is still fairly cheap. Before he got hurt, he's over 9K every game, was putting up 45 plus every game. And